Welcome to the Gladden Longevity Podcast with Dr. Jeffrey Gladden, where our passion is helping you to become an age hacker. On this show, we want to help you optimize your life energy, longevity, health, and human performance with impactful and actionable information by answering 4 questions. How good can we be? How do we make 100 the new 30? How do we live well beyond 120? And how do we live young for a lifetime? I'm Steve Ryder, and Dr. Gladden, we just wrapped up with Ian Clark with Activation Products, and there was some really great information in this one about detoxification and all of these products that Activation Products have that are pretty fascinating. And I'm looking forward to Ian when he sends us some of this stuff.
Yeah, I think what's really interesting about Ian is that he's one of these gentlemen who refused to follow traditional medical advice and went on a path to kind of heal himself. And in that process, has really scoured the earth to come up with some things that are foundational, if you will, for a person's health and longevity. And you're going to find this to be a fascinating conversation because we go deep on some stuff. And he's going to tell you about how he fixed all kinds of things and is doing it for other people. So it's to the point, quite honestly, when we finish, that I want to do an IRB controlled trial with him to test out some of this stuff. And I have previous, information on him, and I talked with him before, prior to the pandemic, and we got a hold of some of his special iodine, which worked incredibly well at, boosting our immune systems. So anyway, I think you're going to love this conversation because we're going to go deep on some stuff that I think you're going to find really foundational. And he's developed some really, really interesting products.
And in our Age Hackers Plus segment, he teased this new product that they've developed, and they have a very limited supply. They're starting to ramp up some production that he's going to be sending us.
January. We'll let you know how it works. I'm curious to try it, but it's supposed to be available in January. So I don't know how soon the podcast will air prior to January showing up. But anyway, it's an exciting thing. Yeah, he's not looking at it as another very foundational piece. So we'll be excited to see that.
And for people that are interested in listening to that, you can go to GladdenLongevityPodcast.com, and there on the page, you'll be able to see how to become an Age Hackers Plus member. And for those of you that are listening and you're really enjoying this show, please be sure to subscribe to this podcast on your podcast app and share it with friends, because that is how we grow, is just sharing this amongst your friends that you think that this would benefit.
And if you really like the programs that we put out, leaving us a 5-star review is super helpful to us. It really helps us get the message out. So we appreciate all your support in both areas, subscribing and the reviews that you leave. Welcome, everybody, to this edition of the Gladden Longevity Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Jeffrey Gladden, and I'm here with my co-host, Steve Ryder. Steve, always good to see you.
Good to see you too, my man.
Yeah. You're looking younger than the last time I saw you. Is that the blur on your camera, or what is that?
No, I think I don't know. This morning I got some really good morning sunlight.
Okay.
So on episode 204, we had Dr. Eric Koreman talking about AIM-7 and his program. And I signed up. I got a great deal and I signed up.
Right.
And I've been getting these reminders over the last month and a half to get morning sunlight.
Okay.
And so I'm sitting out on my back porch.
Nice.
Here in Colorado, 300 plus days of sunshine every year. And so sitting out there getting that morning sunlight. And this morning it was just blue sky, nice and warm, just got out and had breakfast with one of my Never Alone board members. And I genuinely think, and I feel it, impact from morning sunlight. And I assume you probably would agree that that we do need morning sunlight to help set that circadian rhythm. And
I love the idea of morning sunlight and, electrical grounding kind of simultaneously. The best for me is when I get outside, go for a run, then, it's warm here in Puerto Rico. So I, in my bare feet, walk down the beach and jump in the ocean and, ride a couple waves to cool off kind of thing and come back in. That's like a great way for me to get that. I have other ways to do it too. Today I did a Vasper session, 21-minute Vasper session. I'm working on this monster protocol, and it's really good.
What specifically with that protocol are you working on?
Well, they're long intervals, sprint intervals, right? So 2.5-minute sprints, 90-second sprints. So,
wow.
By the time you get to the end, and you have blood flow restriction going on too, right? So, by the time you get to the end of that sprint, your muscles they're talking to you, right? They're talking to you. But what's really fun is to see my cardiovascular fitness continue to improve. I rode my mountain bike the day before, actually yesterday, and just to feel that extra gear, right?
Yeah.
So if you're in the audience and you're listening to this and it's like, well, I've got to a point in my life, I can't find that extra gear that I used to have. Well, I can tell you it's still there. It's still there. And when you live young for a lifetime, you can find it again, when you actually decode your own situation. And I think, this thing we talk about all the time of really living as a younger person, right? I'm 27. And so when I don't feel that extra gear, it's like, no, I'm going to find that extra gear. I know it's there. So anyway, it's super fun to feel that and just feel yourself getting strong. So it's good.
Well, speaking of that extra gear, I would assume that detoxification is a part in helping you get to that point. And that's one of the things he's going to be talking about today.
Yeah, exactly. We're pleased to have a gentleman with us, Ian Clark, who I met several years ago, actually, maybe 4 years ago now, something like that, through a mutual friend. And at that time, he had created some really, really interesting supplements. We were just kind of coming into the whole COVID scene. And he had an iodine that had high bioavailability, and we got some and actually started using it to great effect and really liked it a lot. And he has some other things that we used as well. But Ian, it's great to have you on the show. Thanks for coming on.
Yeah, it's good to reconnect and be here today for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. So tell the audience a little bit about how you got into this, because you're not a physician, you're not a PhD, I don't believe, and yet you've got a story that led you into creating some really highly effective supplements, let's call it. So how did you get into all that?
It was kind of by default. So I just turned 65 in June.
Okay.
And I've got the best health I've ever had in my life. But when I was 46 years old, I had the worst possible situation where I had a large tumor attached to my colon and growing in the bottom of my abdomen.
Okay.
That's what set the alarms off.
Was it a malignant tumor or was it a benign tumor?
I would not allow any testing whatsoever. I don't believe for 1 second I had cancer.
Okay.
They wanted to, of course, indicate that. I was dealing with some specialists in Toronto. My eldest brother was a medical doctor for 30 years at that time. But he had been about 24 years at that time. At any rate, I was being told all the things that I had to do, which was, surgery and all of the drugs and all that. And they wanted to do more testing, and they wanted to, first of all, start to remove things. And I was just very uncomfortable with that. So I started asking questions. Why do I have what I have? And I had a bunch of heart disease problem symptoms. My liver numbers were extremely bad. And so it was like, okay.
Tell us a little bit about your lifestyle leading up to this. I mean, was there alcohol involved? Was there a lack of exercise? Was there high stress? Was there anything out of the ordinary going on? Or you were the picture of health? Or what
No, I was not the picture of health. I was gradually getting worse, and I didn't know why. But then I found out what it was. So I worked in the oil field for 17 years, from 18 years old to 35. That exposed me to a very toxic, lots of lead.
Yeah.
There's lead piped open every connection, and it's everywhere. They don't tell you anything about that. Cadmium, mercury. I had mercury poisoning from multiple amalgam fillings in and out of my head over the years. Didn't know anything about that, of course. And I had lived in homes because we were transient. We had 7 children. And so it was always, moving to different places in different parts of Alberta. And I lived in some moldy houses and didn't know how deadly that was.
Okay.
So it ended up turning out the tumor was just a series of fungal infections, yeast overgrowth, heavy metal poisoning, bacterial overloads, whatever other pathogenic stuff was there, I don't know. But I didn't feel at all comfortable with getting the surgeries because I was in the same boat as my uncles, my mom's 2 younger brothers. In 1978, they both died of cancer 2 days apart. One took a full year with liver cancer, went through all the terrible treatments until he died. The other one was so bad that when they opened him up, he had primary thyroid cancer. It had spread, metastasized through his body. They just sewed him up and said, get your affairs in order. And I didn't like the fact that that was the option at that time. And the person giving them the advice and the treatments guaranteed their death, and they died. And I thought, it's got to be different. Here we're 2004. Surely there's a difference. But it was the same thing. And my brother, the medical doctor, told me it's genetic predisposition. There's nothing you can do about it. I even looked like my uncle Don, the younger one who died of thyroid cancer. And I thought, so genetic predisposition, that's the only thing that I can be told. And because I didn't have the answers, I was unsatisfied. And I woke up one morning and I had this kind of realization that it's an obvious realization that there have to be people on the earth somewhere who have a great deal of knowledge on how to support the body's ability to be healthy naturally. Because I'd seen health food stores and I'd heard a little bit. I knew a little bit, not much. But I thought, wouldn't it be amazing if I could meet these people? Like, who are they? Where are they? How do you find them? I don't know. But the fact that I knew they existed, I had this gut instinct that, of course, they exist. And not only do they exist, but there's going to be people at the very top level of these categories, the best of the best. And if I could, by grace, be led to them, I would really appreciate that. And I would do what I was told. And I made a commitment that I would do whatever it takes. I said, if I have to suffer, fine. If I have to have fun, good. If I got to spend money, didn't have money. I'd just gone bankrupt. Unfortunately, I had a business failure. And so I was not in good shape with money at the time, but we had 7 children. And there was this huge responsibility.
Wow.
That if I was going to be taken up in 36 months.
Yeah. This is a real cauldron that you're in the middle of, right? You're being told you've got a tumor. You've just gone bankrupt. You've got 7 maybe 8 mouths to feed. I don't know if your wife was working too. Maybe she was. But yeah, that's a conundrum right there. That's a lot of stress.
It was a massive amount of stress.
Yeah.
And it made my head spin. And I what was happening, the tumor kept growing. They said, if you don't get it out, it's going to kill you. They don't have any authority to say that, but they said that. And fortunately for me, it was right down at the base of my abdomen, up against the prostate and attached to the colon, because I was having all kinds of digestive stuff going on. And every heartbeat, I could feel it. I'm literally sitting on this thing, rolling around on it.
Wow.
It eventually grew on a satellite out of there. You could feel the tube that went from it to my scrotum and then one to the rectum. And it was just there. And I was like, anyway, I met people soon enough, and it was just gradual in Toronto. I went to the Total Health Show in Toronto, and I met some people that said, look, you just got to detox. You got to get the heavy metals out. You got to deal with these fungal infections you likely have. It's probably just a mass of all that stuff. Try this. So I cleaned up my diet as best as I could. I went pretty radical, actually. For a while.
What did that look like? What's a radical diet? What did it look like in Alberta, Canada, Toronto?
At that point, well, this is actually now in Ontario, because I moved in 2002. I moved my whole family from Edmonton to Toronto.
Okay.
So we've been there now at that point for only 2 years. This is 04 and then 06 is when all hell was breaking loose.
So what'd your radical diet in Toronto look like? I
ran into these raw food vegans.
Okay.
And they told me wheatgrass juice, sunflower sprouts, you got to grow your own. We set up a whole grow operation in our basement. And nice. I dumped 90 pounds off my frame in about 6 months. Okay. And that was radical. Yeah. I turned like a jaundice color. My liver was maxed out. But
now, you turned out jaundice prior to doing all of the radical change in diet, or during the process?
During the process, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and I dumped.
So you were detoxing big time is what was happening.
Heavy detox.
Yeah.
I mean, I told people, I think I lost about 2,400 pounds because I would have these cleanses. I accidentally drank 16 ounces of wheatgrass juice one day. I had built up to 8 ounces a day, and I'd forgotten I drank the 8 ounces already that morning. And I saw another glass on the counter that was just extra, and I drank it thinking that was my dose. And that put me into a 48-hour purge. And I just remember just eliminating so much black, whatever that stuff was.
Okay.
Over and over and over for hours, for 48 hours. And I wasn't eating food. I was like, where's this stuff coming from?
Right.
I was drinking water. Anyway, so I went through all that. That was radical stuff. And I don't know if that saved me or what.
Well, meanwhile, did you notice that if you could feel this thing, could you feel it getting smaller or?
No, it kept growing. Like that tumor grew. So it showed up in 2004. It was completely dissolved out of my body by 2011. So it took 7 years.
Okay.
And eventually, around 2009, it stopped beating with my heart. And it just sat there. And it shrunk down. And then it just stayed like that. And it was sort of this hard thing. I could feel it every time I had a shower. Then in the spring of 2010, I ran into some people who had not in Dallas, Fort Worth. It was a company called IV7. And they were promoting this thing called silver dihydrogen citrate, but it's actually a surface cleaner. You sanitize your house, you sanitize your bathroom, but you can drink it.
Okay.
And this guy told me, just take the little spray bottle and spray 7 sprays a day. He told everybody in the group this. This will go in and get all the infections out of your system because it's a high-tech product that attaches a pico-sized silver ion to a citric acid molecule. And the citric acid is like candy to the pathogens. and it just consumes it, and then the silver tears the DNA apart.
Right.
Like you can spray a surface that's clean for 72 hours with this stuff. And they had these 3M testers. Anyway, so I got home that night. That was in Rochester, New York. I drove all the way back home. Did the 7 sprays when I went to bed. Woke up in the morning and I'm having a shower. And I noticed I was just a little bit puffy down between my legs, which was unusual. I didn't think much of it. And then within 4 or 5 days, it had blown up like this big.
The tumor had blown up that big?
Yeah, it was swelling up because it was just hardened thing that was about probably that long with the big chunk in the middle and then these little chunks out here. Anyways, it blew up and it stayed like that for 2 weeks. I had to wear loose jeans and reaching down to pick stuff up hurt.
Right.
And it was back to the heartbeat again too. I could feel the pulse. Anyway, on about the 15th day, I woke up because I was spraying 7 sprays a night. I woke up and it had deflated. It was back to its original hardened size. Mm-hmm. And so I just kept doing the stuff, but it never swelled up again. I tried drinking 8 ounces of the stuff once, which was kind of dumb. Made me feel a bit queasy. But anyway, by the spring of 2011, it had dissolved completely out of my body. And there was nothing ever since. That's been gone for that long.
You know, most people, if they got a new product and they were using it and all of a sudden something was getting more pronounced, they would say, hey, this is not working. Right. But what's interesting to me is that you stuck with it and kind of kept with it for a period of time until it sort of stabilized and started to go the other direction. What was your thought process at that point? Because most people would shy away. Did you have a feeling that, okay, I'm treating this, and so now in the process of this stuff getting treated, it may be expanding, there may be swelling and other things going on around it as it kind of implodes or gets involuted here?
Yeah, well, as it was expanding. So what I thought, and I may be right about this, is that because I was taking it internally and it was going through my body and dumping all the stuff, my feeling was that was simply a detox thing that was going on, that it showed up to try to help me originally. That I was so loaded with stuff, it was like...
Okay, so you think that was your detox tumor, so to speak. You were dumping toxins into it. Yeah. Right.
Because when it was done, it just disappeared out of my body. Like, why would my body dissolve it anyway? I don't know.
Interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. And so,
in just so we're clear, you never had any testing done to see what kind of toxins you had in your system or anything else. So you were just doing this all just by feel, so to speak.
I did doctor's data. I did a bunch of blood work.
Okay.
I was sure my blood work was not good.
Right.
I was using an interstitial scanner. The numbers were so bad with that, the technician freaked out on me and said, you got to go to the hospital immediately. Don't go get groceries, go straight to emergency. And that was in 2007 that happened. That was in California.
Okay, so you were in the middle of your 7 sprays at that point, right?
Well, no, I wasn't.
Was it 2009 that you started it?
No, the spring of 2010. 2007.
Spring 2010. Okay, got it.
It was March of 2007 when I found out my liver was super messed up.
Got it. But you were in your radical diet in 2007?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
very
so
much.
your radical diet and you're still, let's call it messed up, so to speak, right?
Oh, totally messed up.
Yeah.
Yeah, like that's when I was jaundiced and it was, and I didn't know, that was the first time I'd ever had my liver tested.
Okay.
Because it does a whole scan. The EIS is very interesting, is what it was called. It was a tech out of France, I believe. At any rate, I didn't worry about it too much. I told the guy, I think your machine's broken. And I just stayed on track with the stuff I was doing, which was not overly intelligent, but it's all that I knew to do because I felt better. I felt good. I didn't feel sick. So that whole feeling of like, I want to lay down and die stuff had gone away. And in 2007, I also ran into a nutrient called marine phytoplankton.
Okay.
It was very deep science at that time. It came out of Europe. There was a company in Spain growing it in a photobioreactor. And all I knew is that when I took it, that it made me feel like the battery inside my body was charging up or something. That's how I described it to people. Because I'm not a scientist. I have no credentials whatsoever. I'm totally from the street, I've got a grade 12 education. But I have an ability to absorb information and compute it pretty good. I was actually supposed to go to the university. All my older brothers and sisters went through and got their PhDs and whatever else they were all highly educated. And so I'm like the little black sheep. And I was told positively by everybody, you're committing suicide. You're completely nuts. You're going down the garden path. It's all snake oil. What are you doing? And my brother even phoned my mom and told her that I was committing suicide. At that point, that was back in 2005, because I was questioning and saying, hey, what's up? Anyway, I just said, please leave me alone for 24 months. Give me a 24-month window. Let's not talk about this. Because I'd lost a bunch of weight. I was literally like a skeleton. I was 130 pounds.
Oh, wow. How tall are you?
5'11".
Okay. So that's really light. Okay.
Oh, yeah. It felt great, though. I was like, wow, this is cool. And now my really good weight is right around 160 because I'm a very small frame.
Okay.
So I ran into this phytoplankton. And all I knew is it made me feel great. Didn't understand why. It just did. And it was like pure heirloom, 2 different strains. And it was bathed in concentrated ocean minerals. And this was the first key that I was given that I didn't know was a key yet. I wouldn't find that out until 2022, just a year ago, which is the most exciting thing that I can tell you about in a bit. So I started telling people about it in Canada, and they were like, oh, that's like pond scum or something. What is it, algae? I take spirulina, I wouldn't touch that stuff, and it was expensive. It was like $59 for a 1-ounce bottle, and you only had to take drops of it and to feel it. I took it to California to the Expo West and to a place in Sedona that I went to, this raw spirit festival. And all the people there went nuts over it. They were like, what is that stuff? Is this legal? You know, because there's no stimulants, and it was giving everybody this mental energy and a good feeling. And so they started ordering it from me. And I knew where to get it. I knew to get the raw material from Australia. We'd flew 4 20-liter totes of this concentrated sea mineral to Europe. They made the marine phytoplankton, put it through the centrifuge, put it at 30% to 70% sea minerals, and it instantly stabilized it. I was told it would do that. People in Europe said I was wasting my time. You could never stabilize, but it did stabilize. And they made me wait 2.5 months after they made the first batch before they said I could sell any. They did ship it to Canada to me. So I started bottling it, and that's how it started. We ended up doing $2.8 million of sales of that product in the next 24 months out of the basement of our house.
Nice.
We set up a little clean room. We had little funnels and beakers and, printer and labels and little dropper bottles. And we just shipped 1,000 bottles at a time through Canada Post to California, just only to California. And these people were just eating it up, and they were selling it for $59. I was selling it to them for $20. So we ended up getting about $800,000 into our bank account in a short period of time. And, that was like, what do I do with the money? Mm-hmm. So we took that money and we started to invest it into more research. And the research was based upon physical results rather than trying to find out all the white paper clinicals and that, because we didn't have the money for that. And then it just blew up. We ended up having a lot of knowledge about transdermal magnesium that I found out about. Then we found out about some very specific.
This episode of the Gladden Longevity Podcast is brought to you by H2 Molecular Hydrogen in the Gladden Longevity Store.
Yeah, Steve, you've heard us talk about this numerous times on the podcast in terms of the benefits of H2 and hydrogen water. We love it. It's really the best way to balance your entire redox system. So it really protects you from free radical damage. I take it every time I get on a flight to protect me from radiation damage when I'm flying. And I use it to rejuvenate my brain in the afternoon. There's really 2 kinds of exercise. There's physical exercise, and taking H2 before or after that works great. But also there's mental exercise. And I find that the H2 will bring your brain back when you're tired in the afternoon. So I think it's like the perfect thing for longevity and for performance, quite honestly.
And I talked to you about this, that I found dropping 1 or 2 tablets in a glass of water right before bed. I've seen an overall bump in my deep sleep when I do so.
Fascinating.
Yeah. So if you click on the store tab when you visit GladdenLongevityShop.com and use the promo code podcast10, you'll get 10% off your order. And this code isn't only good for our H2 product, but it's also good for all the supplements we carry. So podcast10 at the GladdenLongevityShop.com.
Yeah, one of the other things that I use it for routinely is when I'm about to go on a mountain bike ride. And I will say this, that if I go on a long mountain bike ride, I will take one prior, I'll take one during, and I'll take one after. And some of the Ironmen that we've worked with have said that when they're doing an Ironman, they'll take it 3 or 4 times throughout the race. And their comment is that it's like taking out the old battery and putting in a new one. it really rejuvenates your body's ability to perform when you're doing more extended athletic activities. So think about that too. If you want to go do a longer hike or whatever else, take it with you.
So GladdenLongevityShop.com, enter podcast 10 for 10% off your order.
H2 molecular hydrogen. It's low-hanging fruit on your quest to make 100 the new 30. Let's talk about phytoplankton for a minute, if I can just interrupt you for a second. So what makes phytoplankton so healthy? I've been looking at some stuff here. It's rich in omega-3s. It's got protein, amino acids, vitamins, minerals, antioxidants, carotenoids, phytonutrients, phytochemicals, trace minerals, and chlorophyll, all of which are potentially healthy. But it sounds like there may be more to it than just the ingredients. Is there something else going on there?
Yes. Yeah. The main event, as it turns out, was the concentrated sea mineral bath. So it's 100 times strength ocean water with all of the trace elements from the ocean.
Okay. And so people understand we end up being depleted. Our food is so nutrient depleted, and part of the nutrient depletion that we experience is these trace minerals. And so a lot of us are depleted in trace minerals, right? We don't have enough iodine, we don't have enough boron, we don't have enough, whatever else, right? And so do you think that it was really, and the ocean is a good source for those, right? Just like a good salt can be a good source for some of them as well. But is your hypothesis that it's really the concentration of trace minerals that's giving you the biggest benefit here? Or do you think, or how do you put that? I know you're not a scientist, but as you've worked with this, what's your process of thinking about that?
Well, since then, all the science has come out on it. So now what I know, which I didn't know then because all I could tell you was to charge my battery up, is that every nutritional molecule known to all historical data on the earth for micro and nanonutrients is in the phytoplankton and is naturally occurring. They did a 40-year study in the south of Spain at the University of Cadiz. It's a microbiology university but specializing in marine. Mm-hmm. And what they were looking for was all the applications of all the thousands of strains of phytoplankton. And one of them was, aquaculture. One of them is, for biofuels. And then they found these two strains that were very close match to what the human body and the animal bodies are looking for.
Okay.
So then they focused on those two strains, and that was it. There's only two strains in this product we call Oceans Alive. Yep. And so it was the combination of the two. But what I found out last year is I wasn't taking enough. When I found out the actual formula, that changed the world. But what it did, though, is it powered this ability. We generated around $90 million, and we were able to put that money back in to build a manufacturing. So we manufacture all of our own product and then learned how to educate properly. Like, what's the truth of this? Like, what is really going on? What are the functional, foundational things that all of us can use to build a foundation to build on top of? And that's how it all kind of evolved into what it became. And we're still a very small company. I say we're not even a pixel on the screen yet, but we did a bunch of heavy lifting to let the physical evidence show up, at the very top of the arrow where all the results are, and then why are they there? And it starts all with the physiology down at the bottom. And these things, as I took them, they taught me. It was like I was learning, that's what it's doing. Okay, then it's doing that. From endocrine system to respiratory to digestive to circulatory to brain function to all these different chemistry things that are happening in our system. And I just got better and better and better. Like every day I was getting healthier. I was getting more agile, more flexible, more mobile. My intelligence was going up, my memory, my endocrine system was dialing in. Like just everything just got better. Mm-hmm. And I wasn't doing a lot of stuff. At the beginning of this journey, when I was really still quite sick, I was sitting on the couch one night and I thought, what if we all find out one day that it wouldn't cost anything to actually be healthy? What would that look like? Yeah. Well, that's too good to be true. There's no, yeah. But then I would be open to that because if I could find that out, that would kind of be cool, right? So I was always open to that. Mm-hmm. And I was at this thing where I would do whatever it takes. And the more time went on, the more I found the more definitive things that were moving the needle the most. And it was just showing up in me. And then we sold everything direct to consumer. So we didn't go the traditional route of going to a distributor and going to a health food store. So we were getting instant feedback with all of our clients for the last 17 years almost now. And that was a great learning curve. And we deleted things that weren't working great. And we only kept the things that really proved themselves. Well, in 2017, I was sent a little text with a link in it. And that text said, self-healing, simple and free. I went, that's interesting. So I clicked on it, and it was a short interview of a gentleman who had gone into the backwoods of China with a backpack and walked around for several years and pulled out 2 major things that he did that he said fixes so many things in the body. And his criteria was it couldn't cost any money. It had to be simple for everyone to learn. It had to fix multiple things at once. And if it didn't do that, it didn't stay in the portfolio.
Okay.
And then when he had these 2 things, he started, it was so profoundly successful that he had a 4-year TV show going on in China. It was so entertaining because he would get older people in their 70s and 80s who couldn't, were using a walker, they couldn't get out of a chair or whatever. He would give them a physical treatment on the show and then bring them back a week later, and they were mobile and they felt better, they looked better. And so this is like really entertaining.
So is this like physical energy type practice?
No, it's not Qigong or anything like that. It's a literal, physical, very visible thing that you do to yourself. It's what I call going through the firewall. So when I saw this video, I just had this gut feel that I wonder, this could be true. I'm going to try it. Mm-hmm. So I got into it and I started treating my own body, which was quite intense, but then it healed. And in 2018, I healed a knee injury that I'd had for 39 years. When I was 21 years old, I had had my knee crushed by accident on a firewall from a blow-up preventer that fell on me.
Oh, wow.
And it crushed my knee, and I could never water ski or snow ski again. Mm-hmm. I was an avid skier.
Okay.
But the reason I couldn't, because I couldn't have any twisting. Mm-hmm. And I'd had every treatment possible. I had CT scans. I had everything trying to get this thing fixed. Never surgery, because the doctors would look at it and go, we can't see anything wrong with your knee. I go, well, how could that be? I couldn't even be in an auditorium for more than 20 minutes with my knee bent without having to leave. Okay. The pain would be so severe. Yeah. Even when I was in the health space. So when I used the treatment on my knee, it totally healed my knee. I did 8 5-minute treatments on my knee, which were very intense.
All right, we got to know more about these treatments. What are these treatments? What are you doing?
It's percussion.
Percussion
using, you can use your hand. I only have my hand to work with to start with, because that's what was explained. Then I found out you can get a silicone hand that has a very specific mechanism. It doesn't plug in or anything. You use it. It takes about 15 minutes to learn the skill of doing it. And it's the thing where you could take your hand right now. Say if I had a torn rotator cuff, which I did actually on the shoulder, real bad, 3 different times. And I did this treatment. It totally healed my shoulder as well. But say I have a bad shoulder or I have a healthy shoulder, one of the two.
So this sounds kind of like pulse shockwave therapy. I don't know if you're familiar with that.
Yeah,
but, right?
Kind of like that.
It's kind of like that, right? So
yeah, it is, because it's using percussion and frequency, and it's minimum 10 minutes with your hand, or if you have the tool, which we call now the activator, it has to be on the bare skin, and it's this simple. That's it. Now, if nothing's wrong with your shoulder, you can do that for an hour and nothing's going to happen. Mm-hmm. When there's something wrong and it's on the bare skin, it will begin to swell up. It will begin to turn purple and black and brown and green and red and whatever color. Yeah. And it will hurt. It will burn. Then as soon as you stop, the pain goes away. You're still fully mobile. You can use your body. It doesn't immobilize you. Mm-hmm. And it takes a week to drain. It literally turns all different light brown and gray.
It's like a bruise. It sounds like it's almost like a bruise where it turns colors, right? It turns purple and then it turns into the yellow, greens and yellows and all that, right? So
right. Well, I'll show you a picture of my knee. I can show you on the screen here.
Yeah.
Of what my knee looked like, because I took hundreds of pictures. I literally helped hundreds of people between 2017 rather, and about 2020, because then I didn't travel after that. But that's a picture of my knee after the first treatment.
Okay, so he's holding up a picture of something that looks pretty bruised. We see, that looks like that's your thigh.
That's actually the top of my knee.
That's the top of your knee,
so
right?
You see my kneecap there, the bony little kneecap?
Yeah, I do. It looks, so were you actually hitting the kneecap or hitting above the knee? Because
no, right above the knee, because I did 8 different treatments and they all released a certain amount, but not that much.
Okay.
When I got to that place and did the same treatment, it blew up. It was burning and swelling, and it after 2 minutes it goes numb and you can really get at it. Mean, it's significant treatment. Mm-hmm. So it looks like a bruise, but it's actually not a bruise. This is called Shaw. So I'll show you some pictures of different angles.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Okay, just hang on. I got to get the picture back.
Yeah, we're looking at it. Looks like a bruised knee on a white guy.
Right.
Very white skin, very pale. So.
Yeah. So as we go through, you see that's 30 minutes later, and look how much it drained already.
It looks like you got beat up.
Right. But then that's 6 hours later is pain.
Okay. Interesting.
And then,
so it's changing over time fairly quickly. Yeah.
Really fast. Yeah. And then within a week, my whole leg went to a light brown, and it drained all the way up to my hip and all the way down to my ankle. So my whole leg turned a light brown.
Yep.
And then it was healed. I can do anything with my knee I want. It completely removed all the problems that I had with it.
That's fascinating. Really fascinating. So with this handheld device, what if you had something on your back that you couldn't reach? Somebody else would have to beat you up?
Yes. Yeah. So, but they just go in and they just start in one place. You never move off that one place. And you just keep it going and a snapping. It's not a smashing. It's like, I could do that.
Right.
That's not going to do it. It's this whipping action.
It's a whipping action of the thing that kind of comes in, boom, boom, boom. And the cadence is about 2 a second, boom, boom,
well,
boom.
You start out like this fast. Mm-hmm. After 2 minutes, you slow down to this.
Okay.
Right. And because then that's what does all the work. At 2 minutes, it's numb.
Yeah.
And you want to keep the pain level of 8 out of 10, 10 being intolerable.
Yeah.
But 8, it feels like the right kind of pain because it really is.
Yeah. Yeah.
It works.
Right kind of pain.
Right. The whole body. I ended up doing my entire body. There's a few areas I still haven't quite finished yet, but I have gotten so much stuff out of my body.
Interesting.
Yep. And anybody I've ever helped with, it's phenomenal.
So can somebody buy this activator, this hand activator?
Yeah, it's on our website. Okay. I'm actually selling, what I'm doing right now, I'm putting together a course because I've sold some of the activators, and then some people will keep them and not use them right, or some people will return because they didn't understand. So what I'm doing, I'm putting a course together, which is not quite finished. And I'm going to focus on like knee healing and things like that. Mm-hmm. And then they get the activator in the course. It's just part of the course.
Got it. So let me ask you this. So this guy went to China and he figured out that we'll call it the activator technique was helpful. What was the other thing? You said he found 2 things.
Well, there were 3 keys. Oh, he found 2 things. So the other one, so the other part of that was where you lay on your back on some chairs off the floor. You go up to the corner of a wall in the house where you have an opening, and one leg goes straight up, the other leg hangs down, loose.
I can't picture this. I can't picture this.
Let's see. I have a picture of it, but it's, I'd have to dig in.
I can't picture it. I don't think the audience can picture it either.
Right.
Steve doesn't look like he's picturing it either. So.
Yeah.
I've got a chair and a wall here, but I'm not sure I can replicate anything yet.
Yeah, but you would be able to, hey, check this one out. This is a torn meniscus that he had fought for 2.5 years trying to get it done. I gave him a 5-minute treatment and it blew up like a loaf of bread.
Okay.
There was no pain as soon as I was done. And with 1 hour, that swelling went down. 1 week later, it totally healed the torn meniscus.
So here's my point. You said something about 8 sessions, initially 5 minutes, then it was like an 8-minute session. So is there a range of things that happen here? Like sometimes 1 treatment's enough, or you always commit to a certain number? Or what happens here?
It depends how much courage you have. Like if you only have enough courage to handle a certain psychological factor around, because people think pain and bruising is bad.
Yeah.
So then I say, well, then just don't go quite as intense as I go. And then you'll have to do 3 treatments. You have to wait a week until it drains, and then go back again.
And then go back. So it's not a daily treatment. It's basically you beat it up, let it recover, go back and beat it up again. I'm just using that term, beat it up, because that's kind of what it looks like.
Yeah, that's right. And so then once it's done, it's done for good. I could take my same knee right now with the slapper. Here I am 6 years later, right? Or 5 years later, and slap it just as hard for an hour, and nothing's going to happen.
And nothing's going to happen. Okay, fascinating. That's really fascinating. I understand pulse shockwave therapy. I don't know if the audience understands pulse shockwave therapy. Pulse shockwave therapy is basically, think of it as a wand that has a dome at the end of it, kind of like a Bosu ball, but it's micro-sized. It's about the size of the palm of your hand, right? And it's filled with liquid, not air. And then an acoustic wave goes through that liquid and creates a shock wave. And you hold that what looks like a miniature Bosu ball filled with liquid onto your body part, and you let the acoustic shock waves go into the tissue. And it's been shown in a lot of studies actually to activate healing, because it actually recruits stem cells, it activates progenitor cells, it activates local peptides like LL37, which is really good at treating almost any kind of infection. It'll activate endogenous other peptides like BPC157, other things. So you're actually, by doing this, I call it sort of micro trauma, you're actually engaging the healing system in a way. Because with a chronic injury, what happens is that the healing sort of stops. And so what you're sort of doing with these chronic injuries is you're now making that more of an acute injury where the body can go in and actually regenerate it. So there are also things you can do to support that, right? Things that you can, like your whole concept of using this Oceans Alive product, which is full of micronutrients and other, amino acids, omega-3s, et cetera. The nice thing about that is that it helps support stem cell function. And then optimizing nitric oxide optimizes stem cell function also, right? So, having a high nitrate diet, and there's some supplements out there that can do this as well. So it's interesting when you start to put some of this together, what you're really tapping into is the body's ability to heal itself. And you're simply giving it the stimulus with this, I don't know, what are we going to call it? The thumper, the slapper,
the activator,
the angry wife. I don't know, what is it?
It almost looks like a sex toy. Hey, what is that?
My S&M buddy. Right. But anyway, so what you're doing with that is you're just really activating endogenous ability to heal by kind of taking a chronic injury, making an acute element to it, and then activating these factors. And you want to support it with good nutrition, sleep, mineral supplements, nitric oxide production, things like that. Maybe there are products out there that will help mobilize stem cells also and do some things like that. So very cool.
Yeah, you're bang on. That's exactly, because I finally realized we're calling attention to the brain to say, hey, you better check out this thing down here. Please produce some stem cells and get them down here. Because how could, all the cartilage fixes, it's the most bizarre thing. It blows people's mind. Every single time it's like, really?
Yeah.
It's so counterintuitive, right?
Right. No, exactly. We use pulse shockwave therapy for quite a few things in conjunction with, other treatments like stem cells or PRP or peptides or things like that. So we're very familiar with it. And we've used it for, 6, 7, 8 years now, I would think. It's also used for erectile dysfunction in a procedure called Gainswave to try to stimulate regrowth of blood vessels and nerves, innervation into the genitalia for actually men and women is another technology that's used. So anyway, just if the audience is listening to this and they think, well, that sounds really crazy, I'm just trying to show you that it's kind of working in parallel with pulse shockwave therapy, which is incredibly well studied. And actually, there's so many papers written about it. In fact, there was a paper done in Germany where during open heart surgery for somebody with a heart attack, they would actually use the pulse shockwave therapy in the open operating field on the heart muscle to show that the heart muscle would have a better recovery after the surgery than it did otherwise. Yes.
Yeah, very cool.
Quite phenomenal. So just so the audience knows, this is what we're talking about here is actually for real. So, yeah.
I'd never run into the pulse wave until I went to my friend's place in Tampa, Richard Shaker. Okay. He has a clinic and he has a very wealthy billionaire that he helps with his health. And so he had the funds to buy that. I think it was 80,000 or 50,000 or something.
Yeah, ours was about 70K. It's not cheap. So
right, yeah. And I tried it, and he said exactly the same thing you're saying.
Right.
He goes, hey, this is like this, right? Yeah. And it's like 35,000 miles an hour or something, where it's going in and bouncing back and forth.
Right.
Really
cool.
And
you can adjust the frequency, the intensity, the whole 9 yards, depending on the body part and all that sort of thing. So, but quite honestly, you do want it to be uncomfortable. You want it to be uncomfortable. And when you find the spot where it's the most uncomfortable, that's the spot where you kind of want to focus, right? So with the pulse shockwave. And so there's probably a little bit of an analogy here too, I would think. And that raises a question. Do you actually, when you're getting started with this, let's say you're working on your knee, do you use the slapper to the thumper? Do you kind of hunt around on the knee to find the tender spot and then focus there? Or do you just pick a spot and go there?
I just picked a spot and went there, and I always did the treatment the same. They're always the same exact treatments. And I did the whole knee. There were 8 different places on my knee that I did 5-minute treatments on each one.
Okay, but not in one sitting. Not in one sitting. Was that over 8 weeks?
Yeah, I would do 2 treatments at a time and then let it drain.
Okay, so 2 areas, 5 minutes each, and then over 4 weeks. Got it. Okay.
And I didn't know where the worst place was. Your body tells you where the worst place is.
That's right.
And it really causes big.
Yep. Nice. Very cool. I like this.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode of the Gladden Longevity Podcast. If you would like more information on what we've discussed or other topics, please reference the show notes or go to gladdenlongevitypodcast.com. You can also find us on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter by searching Gladden Longevity. If you've enjoyed this podcast, please subscribe to get future episodes delivered to you and share our podcast or this episode with someone in your life that you may find benefit. Thank you for listening. We'll be back next week with another exciting episode. The Gladden Longevity Podcast is provided for informational purposes only. It does not constitute medical advice. This content is not intended to be a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Always seek the advice of a physician or other qualified health provider with any questions you may have regarding a medical condition. The use of any information and materials linked to this podcast is at the listener's own risk.